a racist white woman was admitted to the hospital in critical condition, where a doctor saved her life. But when she woke up, she flew into a rage upon realizing that the doctor who saved her was black. The hospital's emergency room buzzed with the urgent rhythms of life and death decisions. Machines beeped incessantly. Monitors blinked, and the beeping of heart rate monitors synchronized with the movements of nurses and doctors, creating a chaotic yet carefully controlled environment. This was a place where life and death was separated by just a decision, a precise surgical cut, or a timely adjusted dose of medication. Dr. Marcus Williams entered amid the hustle, his eyes scanning the room, like a commander surveying the battlefield. His calm and steady demeanor stood in stark contrast to the frantic pace around him. Marcus, having grown accustomed to this scene, maintained a composure that only someone who had faced hundreds of emergency cases could achieve. This was not the first time he'd confronted situations where lives hung in the balance, and it certainly would not be the last. A nurse quickly approached him, her face showing clear signs of concern and tension. Though she maintained the professionalism characteristic of someone used to emergencies, she stopped before Marcus, her breathing quick and shallow. "Dr. Williams, we have a serious case," she said urgently but clearly. "Linda Johnson, 65 years old. She's in critical condition. She's in the operating room now. But there have been major complications." Marcus nodded, his expression immediately more serious. Linda Johnson, an elderly woman, had been rushed into the ER not long ago after suffering a stroke at home. The stroke had caused severe brain damage, and her condition required immediate surgery to relieve pressure on her brain and save her life. But now she was facing more complex complications than Marcus had anticipated, and time was running out. Wasting no time, Marcus swiftly donned his surgical gown, mask and gloves, and stepped into the operating room. The room was illuminated under cold, bright lights, machines beeping continuously, as the medical team did everything they could to keep Linda alive. Minute by minute, a heavy tension filled the space. But Marcus was used to this. To him, this was not just a surgery. It was a race against time, a battle against death, trying to take Linda away from life. Standing at the operating table, Marcus scanned the monitors and quickly understood Linda's condition. His hands prepared for the upcoming maneuvers, each decision needing to be made with absolute precision. His eyes took in every detail, from her heart rate to her blood oxygen levels, all carefully noted. The surgery proceeded with high tension. Marcus remained laser-focused on every cut, every stitch. All the sounds in the room seemed to fade in his mind, leaving only the hum of machines and the quiet murmurs of the medical team, reporting Linda's status. Any small mistake could lead to irreparable consequences. And Marcus knew this better than anyone. He had performed many surgeries like this throughout his career, but each one brought a new weight. Linda Johnson was not just a patient. She was a person, a mother, a grandmother, and the responsibility of saving her life lay in his hands. Time passed slowly, intensely, each moment feeling endless. Sweat began to bleed on Marcus's forehead, under his surgical cap, but his hands remained steady. Unwavering years of medical training had equipped him with the skill and patience to handle such situations. But that did not lessen the pressure he felt. A brief silence fell over the room as Marcus completed the final steps of the surgery. Finally, after hours of intense work, Marcus set down the scalpel, removed his gloves, and glanced at the wall clock. Several hours had passed, but the surgery was successful. Linda Johnson had made it through the critical stage. She was alive and had a chance at a full recovery, though the journey ahead would be long. Looking up at the monitor, Marcus saw that her heart rate had stabilized, and a wave of relief briefly washed over him. There were no applause, no words of praise, and Marcus did not expect any. His job did not require recognition, only results: a life saved. He left the operating room, mentally preparing for the next surgery, or whatever emergency might come next. But not long after his pager beeped, Linda Johnson had woken up in the recovery room, and as Marcus had known from experience, saving a life did not always result in gratitude. A different kind of battle awaited him, not with illness, but with hatred and prejudice. When he stepped into the recovery room, Marcus saw that Linda Johnson had indeed woken up. She lay on the bed, her face still wrinkled with pain and exhaustion from the surgery. However, what struck Marcus most was the cold, sharp look in her eyes as she gazed at him. The moment Linda's eyes met Marcus, her expression changed completely. Her eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, Marcus could see uncontrolled anger flash across her face. "You," Linda rasped, her voice hoarse but full of accusation, her tone as sharp as a knife. "You're the one who operated on me." Marcus stood by her bedside, maintaining his professional calm. "Yes, I'm Dr. Marcus Williams," he responded evenly. "I performed your surgery. You were in critical condition, but the surgery was successful. You're recovering well." But Marcus's calm explanation only seemed to fuel Linda's fury. She squinted, her cold eyes sweeping over him from head to toe. "I cannot believe it. I woke up and saw you. Someone like you standing here. What kind of hospital is this? I want to see a real doctor, not you." Marcus remained composed, though Linda's hateful words made the air in the room feel stifling. This was not the first time he had faced discrimination based on his skin color, but that did not make moments like these any less painful. He took a deep breath, keeping his tone neutral as he replied, "I'm the doctor who performed your surgery, Linda. The operation was difficult, but we did everything we could to ensure you would survive and recover. You're on the right path to healing, and I'll continue to monitor your progress." However, Linda was not interested in his explanation. She struggled to sit up, determined, but in obvious pain, her face contorted with anger and discomfort. "You call this recovery? I've never felt worse in my life. I cannot believe they let someone like you operate on me. What did you to me? I'm in terrible pain. You must have done something wrong." Her voice grew sharper, each word dripping with resentment that Marcus knew all too well. He looked back at the monitors and her medical chart, confirming that everything was progressing well, with no signs of complications. But to Linda the truth did not seem to matter. All she saw was him, a black man, and that was enough to make her angry and defiant. "Your current condition is a natural result of surgery," Marcus continued, keeping his voice calm and professional. "Post-surgical pain is normal. But if you feel the need for an adjustment in pain medication, I can make that change. However, I assure you that you're recovering properly." Linda did not listen. She turned away, her face twisted in anger. "I do not need your care anymore. I'm not some charity case. I want to see a real doctor. Someone who knows what they're doing, not someone like you." Her voice rose, the hatred clear in every word. The tension in the room grew heavier than ever. Marcus stood silently for a moment, allowing the silence to settle before responding. "I understand your concerns, Linda, and I assure you that you're receiving the best care. However, if you'd like a second opinion, I can arrange for you to see another doctor." He spoke gently but firmly, his gaze never leaving her bitter face. She scoffed, refusing to look back at him. "I will not let this go. I want to speak to the hospital director. I'll make sure this is known. You'll regret allowing someone like you to work here." Marcus nodded slightly, his face showing no emotion. "I'll report your request to the hospital director," he said before turning and leaving the room, leaving behind Linda's muttering complaints. As he walked down the hallway, Marcus felt a familiar wave of disappointment wash over him. He had encountered many patients like Linda before. People who did not care about what he'd done to save them, only focusing on the color of his skin. He knew he had fulfilled his duty as a doctor, but there was no denying that such discrimination still hurt. Taking a deep breath, he tried to keep his calm intact. Outside, the hospital returned to its familiar rhythm, but inside Marcus, a silent battle continued. Marcus walked out Linda Johnson's room, leaving behind her anger and baseless accusations. He paused in the hallway, taking a deep breath to calm himself. This was not the first time he had faced racism in his career. and he knew it would not be the last. But no matter how prepared he was, the hatred and prejudice from patients like Linda always left him feeling exhausted and saddened. Marcus never let it break his professionalism, but inside he felt the weight of constantly having to prove himself. Just because of the color of his skin. He had spent years studying, training, and working hard to become a skilled doctor. But to people like Linda, none of that mattered. They only saw a black man standing before them, and that was enough for them to reject him. Marcus raised his head, his eyes scanning the crowded hallway. His steps slowed his heavy footsteps, reflecting the weighty mood he carried. He had grown used to suspicious looks, biting remarks from a few patients or colleagues, but Linda's harshness felt particularly heavy, maybe because he had saved her life, yet instead of gratitude, he faced irrational and hateful accusations. A nurse passed by, recognizing Marcus with a respectful nod, but Marcus responded only with a tired smile. The tension within him remained. He thought about his offer to arrange another doctor for Linda. That would be easier for both of them. But Marcus knew he could not always avoid situations like this. He had learned to confront them since the start of his career, knowing that success came not only from expertise, but from overcoming deep-seated prejudice. When he returned to the staff lounge, Marcus removed his surgical cap, he feeling the exhaustion creeping into his body. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment, searching for some peace amid the chaotic rhythm of the hospital. But even in those brief moments of stillness, his mind was haunted by the injustice of Linda. She had not just rejected his care. She had questioned his entire competence and dedication, simply because of his skin color. Dr. Williams, a voice called out. Breaking his quiet, Marcus opened his eyes and saw a nurse standing at the door, her face tense. Ms. Johnson is still demanding to see the hospital director. She's threatening to file a complaint and even sue you for incompetence. Marcus sighed, suppressing the growing frustration. I expected as much, he replied. His voice calm, though an undercurrent of frustration stirred within him. Let Dr. Harris handle it. I'll check on the other patients. The nurse nodded, worry evident on her face. She also said she wants you fired. She's very angry, and things could get more complicated. Marcus maintained his outward calm, though the sense of injustice became even more pronounced. He understood that accusations like Linda's could cause significant trouble, not just for him, but for the hospital. Complaints like hers could lead to investigations, or, worse, damage the reputation of the entire hospital. I'll let Director Harris deal with it, Marcus said, his tone patient but wary. We all know the truth here. My job is to care for patients, and I did that to the best of my ability. He left the staff lounge, returning to the busy hallway. Linda's accusations still echoed in his mind. But Marcus pushed them aside. He could not let her prejudice and hatred derail his focus. He had other patients to care for, and they deserved his full attention and expertise. As he resumed his work, Marcus felt a simmering frustration beneath the surface. Though he had grown used to situations like this, he could not help but feel disheartened by the knowledge that no matter how hard he worked, some people would always reject him just because of his skin color. But Marcus did not let that stop him. He had chosen this path, and no matter how difficult, he would continue to stand firm. And no matter how hard Linda Johnson tried to deny what he had done for her, Marcus knew one undeniable truth. He had saved her life, and nothing could erase that. Marcus walked briskly through the hospital corridors, Linda Johnson's threat still lingering in his mind. From room to room he checked on other patients, trying to keep his focus on the medical work. Yet despite his efforts, the sting of Linda's hateful accusations and the weariness from enduring racial discrimination began to weigh heavily on him. Not long after, Marcus received word from a nurse that Linda had requested to meet with the hospital director, Dr. Julia Harris, and had continued to threaten legal action against him. The situation escalated as Linda repeatedly demanded that Marcus be fired, insisting that someone like him had no right to be a doctor, her words echoing through the hospital's hallways. Later in the afternoon, Marcus received a call asking him to come to Dr. Harris's office to discuss the situation. He entered the office, where Dr. Harris sat behind her desk, looking tired but calm. Dr. Harris was an experienced hospital administrator who had dealt with her fair share of difficult patients. However, Marcus knew this case was particularly sensitive because it involved more than just medical issues. It touched on deep-seated racial prejudice and the honor of the entire medical staff. "Marcus, have a seat," Dr. Harris said gently, but with a serious tone, inviting him to sit in the chair in front of her desk. "I've heard about the situation with Miss Linda Johnson." Marcus sat down, keeping his posture straight and his expression calm, though he knew the situation might be more serious than it appeared. "Yes, I've tried explaining her recovery and treatment to her, but it seems she's not interested in medical facts," Marcus said calmly. "She's focused on accusing me based on her own prejudices." Dr. Harris sighed, rubbing her temples, as if trying to alleviate the tension. "We all know what she's doing. She's already filed complaints, not just against you, but against the entire hospital. She's demanding to see me and threatening to sue the hospital if we do not deal with you." Marcus nodded, the exhaustion from the long day seeming to intensify. He was not surprised, but that did not make the situation any less difficult. "I know her accusations are baseless. I've thoroughly reviewed her condition, and her recovery is progressing better than expected. Despite all her complaints, there were no mistakes in the surgery, and nothing unusual during her recovery. Dr. Harris looked Marcus straight in the eye, her gaze softening with empathy. "I know you followed all the proper procedures, Marcus. I have full confidence in your abilities and professionalism. We'll handle this situation through the proper legal channels, but as you know, sometimes baseless accusations can cause significant disruptions." Marcus took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "I'm not concerned about investigations or having my surgery reviewed. What bothers me is the fact that, just because of the color of my skin, she's decided I'm not worthy of caring for her." Dr. Harris remained silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right, Marcus. This is not just a medical complaint. It's about prejudice, and we need to be careful in handling this, because any action the hospital takes could be misconstrued as us not supporting you." "I understand," Marcus replied, his voice still patient and resolute. "I just wanted to be clear that I did everything in my power for the patient, no matter what she thinks. The only thing I want is for the truth to come out." "We are fully behind you," Dr. Harris said, her gaze firm but supportive. "You're one of the best doctors here, and the hospital will not let a prejudiced patient like Mrs. Johnson damage your career. I'll meet with her and handle this issue directly. But you need to be prepared for the possibility that she might escalate things." Marcus nodded, feeling a small sense of relief, knowing the hospital was backing him, but Linda's threat still weighed heavily on him. He understood that accusations like hers could stir up major problems, not just for him, but for the entire hospital. Even though the hospital was on his side, allegations of racial discrimination or legal action could still cause serious damage. "When I meet with her, I'll explain her condition and make it clear that we've done everything by the book," Dr. Harris continued. "But Marcus, I also want you to know that no matter what she does, we are fully behind you. You're not alone in this." Marcus bowed his head slightly in gratitude, feeling the emotional support from Dr. Harris was invaluable at this time. "Thank you. I'll continue to do my job, and if there's anything else I can do, please let me know." Dr. Harris offered a tired but sincere smile. "Just keep doing your excellent work, Marcus. We'll take care of the rest." As Marcus left Dr. Harris's office, the pressure on his shoulders still lingered. He knew the battle with Linda Johnson was not over. Even though the truth and the law were on his side, he understood that this fight would not be easy. The bitterness of racial discrimination and baseless accusations still weighed heavily on his heart, but Marcus also knew he would not let that stop him from continuing the work he had dedicated his life to, saving and caring for patients, no matter what they thought of him. The next day, the atmosphere at the hospital seemed more tense. As rumors of Linda Johnson spread, nurses and medical staff began whispering about her, constant complaints about Marcus, and her threats to sue the entire hospital. A few of them appeared worried, not because they doubted Marcus's ability, but because they understood how accusations like this could create unnecessary, negative impacts, even if they were entirely unfounded. Marcus continued his work as usual. He visited other patients, caring for each one, with the dedication he always maintained. But the tension from the situation with Linda had not subsided every time he passed by her room. The silent glances exchanged between the nurses made Marcus feel the weight of the situation even more. Late that morning, Marcus received word that Linda had been moved to a private room to facilitate her continued treatment. Although she had not stopped complaining about her condition, all tests and indicators showed that she was recovering well from the surgery. This made it even harder for Marcus to deal with her, knowing that no matter how clear the medical facts were, Linda simply could not accept that he, a black doctor, had saved her life. That morning, Marcus decided to fulfill his responsibility and check on Linda's condition. Even though he knew the confrontation would be difficult. As he entered Linda's room, she was already sitting up in bed, her face darkening the moment she saw him walk in. There was no surprise, only the familiar look of contempt she had given him since waking up from surgery. "What are you doing here?" Linda immediately snapped, her voice cold and full of hatred. "I told you I do not need your care anymore. I want to see a real doctor, not you." Marcus kept his voice calm, as he had always done. "I'm here to check on your recovery, Linda. Your signs are showing that you're recovering well, and I need to make sure everything is progressing as planned." Linda cut him off, her voice becoming harsher. "Do not talk to me about your plan. I've been in pain since I woke up. Do not think I do not know what you did to me. I know your type. You think you can make mistakes, and no one will find out." The insult in Linda's words no longer surprised Marcus, but he still felt the quiet anger simmering within him. Even so, he maintained his professionalism. "The pain you're feeling is normal after surgery, Linda. If you need, I can adjust your pain medication. But you're recovering well. I assure you that everything has been done correctly." Linda sneered, her eyes filled with even more hostility. "You're only saying because you're afraid I'll sue. You are not you. You think you can cover up your incompetence. You do not deserve to be a doctor." Marcus felt a wave of frustration rise within him, but he remained composed. He had dealt with difficult patients before, but the malice and racism coming from Linda had taken everything to another level. She was not just angry about her health. She wanted to destroy his career, simply because of his skin color. Linda, Marcus said, trying to keep his tone gentle. I understand you're upset, but your accusations have no basis. I've done everything in my power to ensure you receive the best care. Your health is my priority, and I would never do anything to compromise that. But Linda was not listening. She cast a disdainful look at Marcus, her eyes burning with unhidden fury. You're going to pay for this. Dr. Williams, you're going to lose this job. And I'll make sure of it. Marcus stood there for a moment, letting Linda's threats hang in the air. Without responding, he had faced racism and baseless accusations before, but this time Linda's hatred felt more personal. It was not just about his medical skills. It was about who he was, his very identity and his race. Finally, Marcus nodded slightly. I'll let the hospital director know about your request, he said softly before turning to leave the room. As the door closed behind him, Marcus felt as though he had just walked out of a mental battlefield. Not against Linda's illness, but against the hatred she carried. In the hallway, Marcus took a deep breath, trying to keep the exhaustion from showing on his face. He knew this situation would not end peacefully. Linda Johnson was not just a difficult patient. She was someone using her hatred to push things far beyond the truth and medicine. But Marcus also knew that no matter how difficult it got, he would not let prejudice stop him from continuing the work he had chosen, the work he loved and had spent his life pursuing. After the tense confrontation with Linda Johnson, Marcus knew the situation had spiraled beyond his control. Linda's threats were not just baseless complaints anymore. She truly wanted to destroy his reputation and career, simply because of his skin color. Even so, Marcus tried to continue his work with dedication, caring for his other patients as usual. But deep down, he knew that dealing with Linda would not be easy. At the end of the day, Marcus received a call from the hospital director, Dr. Julia Harris. She asked him to come to her office immediately. When he entered, Dr. Harris was seated behind her desk with a serious, yet determined look on her face. Marcus, I just met with Linda Johnson. Dr. Harris began, her voice low and slightly worried. She's not only continuing to threaten to sue you in the hospital, but she's also repeatedly demanding that you be fired immediately. Marcus sat down in the chair opposite her, sighing. I figured as much, he said, his voice wary but still calm. I do not think she'll stop until she gets what she wants. Dr. Harris nodded, sighing heavily. She's declared she will not leave the hospital until her complaint is addressed, and she's been causing chaos all over the hospital. Her condition is stable enough for discharge, but she refuses to leave. Marcus leaned back in his chair, feeling the exhaustion pressed down on every fiber of his body. He knew that Linda was not going to be persuaded easily. And with what she had shown, keeping her in the hospital any longer would only make the situation more tense. "What do we do?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice calm, though the concern was clear. Dr. Harris looked directly at Marcus, her eyes filled with determination. "She's been informed that if she refuses to leave, we'll have to involve security. We've explained repeatedly that she's recovering well, and there's no reason for her to stay. We're ready to discharge her, but she's still stubbornly refusing to leave." Marcus said nothing, knowing that the situation would not end peacefully. Patients like Linda did not care about reason. They only cared about expressing their hatred and trying to get their way at any cost. Finally, Dr. Harris sighed and stood up, moving toward the window of her office. "Security will be here in a few minutes. If Linda does not cooperate, we'll have no choice but to remove her from the hospital in a way we did not want." Just then, Marcus and Dr. Harris heard a knock at the door. Greg Sanders, the head of hospital security, entered with a serious expression. "We're ready, Dr. Harris," he said shortly. Dr. Harris nodded. "I understand. Please, try to handle this situation as gently as possible." Marcus stood up, preparing to face Linda one last time, alongside Greg and the security team. As they approached Linda's hospital room, the atmosphere in the hospital felt heavier than ever. Nurses and staff watched from a distance, concern evident on their faces. Linda was sitting on her bed, her face hardened with defiance. She saw Marcus and the security team enter, and immediately her eyes filled with rage. "I said I told you. I'm not leaving until I speak to someone in charge." "Who will deal with this?" Linda shouted, her voice filled with anger and desperation. Greg Sanders stepped forward, keeping his tone calm but firm. "Mrs. Johnson, you've been asked to leave. Your health is progressing well, and there's no reason for you to remain here. If you do not cooperate, we'll have to escort you out." Linda shook her head, her hateful gaze never leaving Marcus. "Escort me out? Who do you think you are? I'll sue every one of you. I'll destroy his career." She pointed at Marcus. "And he'll never practice medicine again." Greg did not let her continue. He signaled to two security officers, who quickly packed Linda's belongings. Despite Linda's screaming, anger and constant threats, they moved her into a wheelchair to transfer her out of the hospital. Her yelling echoed through the hallways, like the final sounds of a battle that had gone on far too long. As Linda was wheeled out of the hospital, Marcus stood quietly in the distance, watching the scene unfold with mixed emotions. Her hatred had caused an uproar throughout the hospital, and now she was being forced to leave. But it did not feel like a victory to Marcus. Even though she was gone, he knew the real battle was not over. As Linda was taken out through the hospital doors, she turned back to look at Marcus one last time. her eyes burning with hatred. "I'll be back. You have not seen the last of me. I'll destroy your career. Do not forget that." Marcus stayed silent, letting Linda leave in her uncontrollable rage. He knew her threats might still come true, but with the support of the hospital and his trust in the truth, he reminded himself that he would face whatever came next. As the hospital slowly returned to normal, Marcus exhaled deeply, knowing this was only the beginning of a longer battle. Linda might have left, but the scars from this confrontation remained, and Marcus knew he had to prepare for what was to come. Although Linda had been forced to leave the hospital, her threats did not disappear. Just days after her discharge, Marcus received word from hospital administration that Linda Johnson had officially filed a lawsuit. She accused Marcus of medical malpractice and discrimination, demanding large compensation for damages. The lawsuit targeted not only Marcus, but also the entire hospital, holding them responsible for Marcus's incompetence. News of the lawsuit quickly spread throughout the hospital. While most of Marcus's colleagues supported him, a few expressed concern about the potential impact the lawsuit could have on the hospital's reputation. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere at the hospital remained tense. Marcus could feel the anxiety around him, but it did not deter him. He knew he had done the right thing and had no reason to fear Linda's baseless accusations. One day, while Marcus was working in the doctor's lounge, he received a message from hospital director, Dr. Julie Harris, asking him to come to her office. When he walked in, Dr. Harris was already seated with a serious expression, and beside her was David Collins, the hospital's lawyer. Marcus knew this meeting would be tough. "Marcus, I've just received word from the legal department about Linda Johnson's lawsuit." Dr. Harris began, her voice calm but serious. "She's officially filed her lawsuit, and she's accusing not only you, but the entire hospital. She's demanding a large settlement and accusing us of racial discrimination." Marcus sighed, feeling the weight of the tension in the room. "I understand," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "but we all know her accusations are baseless. I performed the surgery by the book, and she's recovering well. This is clearly a case of prejudice and spite." David Collins, the hospital's lawyer, spoke up, his expression serious. "You're right, Marcus. We've thoroughly reviewed all the records and information regarding the surgery. The medical report show that you followed all the proper protocols. The issue here is that Linda is trying to exploit this situation to pressure the hospital and use the racial discrimination allegation as a weapon." Marcus nodded, though he felt a heaviness in his chest. This lawsuit was not just about an unhappy patient. It was about his honor and his career. Linda was using racism as a tool to attack him, and that made the situation much more complicated. We're fully prepared to defend you in this case. David continued, his voice steady. We have all the evidence to prove that you performed the surgery correctly, and there was no sign of any racial discrimination. But you need to be mentally prepared, because this lawsuit could drag on and have negative psychological and reputational effects. Marcus exhaled deeply, feeling the pressure on his shoulders. I'm ready to face this, he said, his voice resolute. I know the truth will prevail, but dealing with such accusations is never easy. Dr. Harris sat quietly for a moment, then spoke, her voice full of empathy. We understand. This situation is incredibly difficult for you, Marcus, but I want you to know that the hospital fully supports you. I and all your colleagues believe in your abilities and professionalism. What's important now is that we stand strong together in this fight. Marcus felt a small sense of relief, hearing Dr. Harris's support. He had always known the hospital had his back, but that did not lessen the pressure of the lawsuit. Linda had turned a medical situation into a personal battle, and he would have to face her in court. After the meeting, Marcus continued his work as usual, but the lawsuit lingered in his mind. His colleagues and nurses still greeted him and chatted with him, but he could sense the underlying tension in their words and glances. While most people believed in him, Linda's lawsuit still loomed like a dark cloud over him and the hospital. As the court date approached, the pressure mounted. The hospital's legal team, led by David Collins, worked tirelessly to prepare the case, gathering evidence and testimonies to counter Linda's claims. Marcus felt as though he were being drawn into the center of a storm he could not control. Then the day finally came. Marcus, along with the hospital's legal team, entered the courtroom, the tension palpable in the air. Across from them sat Linda and her lawyer, her face showing no signs of backing down. As she prepared to ruin Marcus's reputation, her eyes met his with deep-seated hatred, as though she were trying to convict him on the spot. The trial lasted the entire day, with each side presenting their evidence and arguments. Linda's lawyer tried to complicate matters, accusing Marcus and the hospital of failing to provide adequate medical care, and claiming that Linda had suffered prolonged pain after the surgery. But David Collins did not back down. He resolutely defended Marcus with solid medical evidence, showing that all procedures had been followed properly, and that Linda's post-surgery condition was entirely normal. The strongest piece of evidence was the testimony of medical experts, who confirmed that Linda's surgery and recovery had gone as expected, with no indication that Marcus had done anything wrong. In the end, after a long and tense day, the judge delivered the verdict. Linda's accusations were dismissed entirely. There was no evidence to support her claims of malpractice or racial discrimination. and the lawsuit was deemed groundless. The case was over and Marcus had won. Even so, the relief was fleeting. Marcus knew this battle, while resolved in court, had left deep psychological scars. Linda may have lost the lawsuit, but she had left a lasting mark on his life, a reminder of the hatred and discrimination he would carry with him forever. As Marcus left the courthouse, he felt a sense of relief, but also exhaustion. The battle with Linda was over, but he knew he would have to keep fighting to protect his career and his honor. When Marcus walked out of the courthouse, after winning the lawsuit, a wave of relief swept over him. But he could not deny that the emotional scars from his battle with Linda Johnson still lingered. The drawn-out lawsuit had drained much of his energy and patience. He had faced not only unfounded accusations, but also the deep societal prejudices Linda had tried to use to destroy his career. Although he had won the legal fight, Marcus knew the battle did not end there. The wounds Linda had left behind would not be easy to forget. Throughout the trial, he had not only had to prove that he was a skilled doctor, but also that he was worthy of his position, regardless of his skin color, something he had grown accustomed to facing since the start of his medical career. The next day, as Marcus returned to the hospital, he sensed a subtle but noticeable shift in the atmosphere. His colleagues, who had previously only regarded him with silent admiration or respect, now looked at him with a clearer sense of admiration. No one said it outright, but Marcus knew that the battle he had just fought had solidified his reputation at the hospital. He had not only proven his medical expertise, but it also shown his colleagues his resilience and determination to defend his honor. Dr. Julia Harris, the hospital director, was waiting for him in her office that afternoon. When he entered, she stood up and extended a sincere handshake. "Marcus, I know this was not easy for you, but you handled everything with absolute professionalism. We are very proud of you." Marcus nodded, feeling grateful for Dr. Harris's support. "I'm also very thankful for the hospital's support and the legal team. The most important thing for me is that the truth came to light," he replied, his voice calm, but not hiding his exhaustion. Dr. Harris sighed, sitting back down and looking at Marcus with empathetic eyes. "I know having to face accusations of racial discrimination is not easy, but Marcus, you've shown that you're not just a great doctor. You're strong and resolute. This hospital is lucky to have you." Marcus felt the sincerity in Dr. Harris's words. While the battle with Linda was over, he knew that in the coming days there would still be skeptical looks from those outside, people who did not fully understand the truth, but that did not worry him as much as it once did. He had weathered the storm, and now he could continue his work without looking back. We'll always have patients like Linda Johnson, Dr. Harris said, breaking the silence. People who cannot accept a world where doctors do not always look like the image they're used to. But what's important is that we continue to stand up and face that like you did. Marcus nodded in agreement. I've understood that for a long time, he responded, his voice softening. This fight was not the first, and it certainly will not be the last. But now I know I'm not alone. The support of the hospital and my colleagues is what got me through. Dr. Harris smiled gently. That's right, Marcus. You're not alone. We'll always have your back. As Marcus left Dr. Harris's office, he felt a sense of lightness. The legal battle might have ended, but something bigger had changed. He felt more confident in himself and his role in the medical community. The hospital's support had strengthened him, helping him realize that while there would always be people like Linda Johnson ready to drag him down, there were also people ready to stand up for and believe in him. Still, Marcus could not deny that the lawsuit had left indelible marks on his mind. Not because he was afraid, but because Linda's unreasonable hatred had left him feeling more bitter about the society he lived in. She had not just attacked his competence, she had attacked his very identity. Based on his skin color, something he could never change. Day by day, the hospital gradually returned to its usual rhythm. His colleagues still treated Marcus the same, but there was a deeper respect for him now. They understood that he was not just a skilled doctor, but also a resilient person, willing to stand up for his honor, no matter the hatred and prejudice he faced. One late afternoon, while Marcus sat alone in the staff lounge, he reflected on everything that had happened. He had gone through so much stress, but in the end he had won. Not just in court, but in his personal battle against the doubts and injustices Linda had tried to impose on him. He gazed out the window, the golden sunlight filtering through the city's tall buildings. The battle with Linda was over, but he knew the road ahead would still be full of challenges. Unfounded accusations might come back one day, but now Marcus knew he had the strength to face whatever lay ahead. With renewed determination, Marcus stood up, took a deep breath, and smiled softly. He had survived the storm, and now he could continue on his path stronger, more resilient, and ready for whatever life threw his way. A few weeks after the trial ended, Marcus slowly returned to his usual routine. At the hospital, everything seemed to have gone back to normal, but inside he knew he had changed. The battle with Linda Johnson, though exhausting, had helped him realize his own strength and, more importantly, the value of truth. One late afternoon, while reviewing patient records at the nurse's station, Marcus heard familiar footsteps approaching. Greg, the head of security, came up with a serious yet relieved expression. You know, Greg began, leaning against the counter. Linda Johnson officially withdrew her lawsuit. I just heard from the legal department. Marcus looked up, his eyes flickering with surprise. She gave up, he asked, his voice a mix of surprise and relief. Yeah, her lawyer sent over the paperwork. They're not pursuing the case anymore. Greg replied, I guess after all this. She realized she could not win against the truth. Marcus remained silent for a moment, letting the words sink in. The long battle with Linda Johnson had not just been a legal fight. It had been an inner battle of resilience and self-respect. Even though Linda had withdrawn her accusations, the scars from this confrontation would always remind him of the fight, not just against prejudice, but against himself. Thanks, Greg, Marcus said, a light smile crossing his face, feeling the weight lifting from his soul. But still, she taught me a valuable lesson. Greg raised an eyebrow in curiosity. What lesson is that? That sometimes strength does not come just from winning. Marcus replied, his eyes gazing off toward the window, but from standing firm, not giving in to injustice. Linda may have tried to ruin me, but I've learned to hold on to my belief in myself. Greg nodded thoughtfully. You're right about that. And you did not stand alone. The whole hospital was behind you. The conversation continued in a more relaxed tone. Marcus felt lighter, but he could not fully shake the deep thoughts about the lawsuit. When Greg left, Marcus stood quietly in the staff lounge, gazing out at the golden sunlight, slowly fading outside the window. Marcus knew the battle with Linda was not just about him. It represented millions of others who faced discrimination and prejudice they never wanted, but now he no longer felt alone. He had his colleagues, the hospital, and most importantly, himself standing firm. As he left the hospital that evening, Marcus felt his steps grow more assured, as if he had crossed a significant milestone in his life. The challenges ahead was still there, but he was ready. The scars from this battle, instead of weakening him, would make him stronger. He had learned to accept them not as burdens, but as marks of resilience. As Greg had said, the battle had left scars, but they would serve as a source of strength for him to continue, and with unwavering faith in himself. Marcus knew that whatever challenges awaited him, he would always stand strong, just as he had throughout his life. Marcus's story reminds us that in life, we need more than just skill. We need the determination and courage to overcome injustice and prejudice. Always stand firm in the face of adversity, for truth and righteousness are our greatest strengths. If you found inspiration in this story, do not forget to subscribe to follow more meaningful stories. Thank you for your support.